great energy, a good work ethic, really freakish talents. But a front office, a coaching staff needs to see results. Welcome to Northside Territory, your Chicago Cubs podcast on the Foul Territory Network. This is Patrick Mooney of The Athletic, opening it up for a mailbag episode during this final stretch before the trade deadline. The Cubs' last gasp attempt to avoid a sell-off has failed. The offense scored 9 runs in the first 6 games out of the All-Star break, losing 2 must-have series against real playoff contenders. Cubs President of Baseball Operations Jed Hoyer has already signaled that he has no plans to add rental players for the final 2 months of the season. And he is not someone who likes to sit out the action at this time of year. So that almost certainly means selling, and it's really not that hard of a decision at this point. At the start of Thursday's off day, the Cubs are 49-55, 11 games back in the division, and 5 games out of a wild card spot. Look for Hoyer's front office to at least move some relievers before the deadline, such as Mark Leiter Jr., and we'll see how much deeper those cuts go as the Cubs pivot towards the future once again. Let's get into your questions. All right, let's get into your questions. We'll start here with Brian Deal, who wonders, do you think that the old slogan, "There's always next year," is something that helps Jed and company sleep at night? Now, I think this is something that certainly helps ownership and the business side get through their work days. Clearly, if you're at Wrigley at all during this homestand, you just saw enormous crowds, standing room only, 40,000 plus, up in the high 30s for a team that is now in last place and getting prepared for a sale at the trade deadline. Within baseball operations, though, I would not characterize Jed Hoyer as feeling super comfortable right now. I know what you may see on marquee and kind of the patience and the rationality that he shows on camera. That is just part of his job, that he has to project calm, that he has to look at the long view and take all of those things into account. But I would not characterize the front office right now as being super comfortable with how this has played out. They're very much aware of how it looks when the team that you assembled is in last place and can't keep up in a very big, mediocre mix of teams in this wild card race. Jed has 1 more season remaining on his contract. I would still be surprised if ownership decided to move on from what has been a very logical, rational plan that aligned with ownership's long-term interests. Like, in a lot of ways, this is sort of the team that they had wanted built, meaning a steady flow of young pitching, some rational by free agent standards deals for players who have performed really well. Talking about Shota Imanaga, Jamison Tyone, even Dansby Swanson, while he has not performed at all offensively, he's still a Gold Glove shortstop and the guy that analytically they had sort of targeted as the one who made the most sense for them as part of that great shortstop class from a couple of years ago. So this is a long way of maybe getting around the fact that, yeah, this team should be much better right now, and that there is absolutely no hiding from that. You look back to the 2021 trade deadline, there's not a lot to show for it. I think if you look at the farm system, it is in better shape than it had been, but you don't see any sort of Chris Bryant type prospects knocking down the door. And really, it's just been another weird year of where things just haven't synced up. The Cubs have not clicked in all phases of the game. I think firing David Ross and bringing in Craig Counsell was inevitably going to put more focus on Jed Hoyer and his front office. And right now, the Cubs have not come close to delivering on the promises that they made. And I think that's why this coming offseason, there's going to be a ton of pressure on them to get outside their comfort zone, make some bigger deals, and it's setting up a playoffs or bust year next year, assuming they get that.
Eric Kratz here from FT. I'm a former athlete that really pays attention to his routine. And AG1 every morning before my workouts is something that gets my day going.
Hey, Braun here. AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that delivers daily nutrients and gut health support, and it's backed by multiple research studies so you can trust what you're putting in your body.
Unlike other products which only test their ingredients in isolation, AG1 tests their formula as a whole.
Ready for this stat? 97% of people in a research study felt more energy after 30 days of drinking AG1. If I had to recommend one product to support whole body health, it's AG1, and that's why FT is excited to have them as a new partner. Starting your journey with AG1 is a win. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/foul. That's drinkag1.com/FOUL. Go check it out, FT fam.
Aaron Backer. Sorry, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce your name, but Aaron, you have a very good question here. What is the front office's view of Christopher Morel? Seems like a great guy, but his play hasn't been great this year. With prospects on the way behind him, how much more leash does he have? Aaron, I think everyone around the Cubs recognizes that Christopher Morel has great energy, a good work ethic, some really freakish talents. And to his credit, he has gotten better in certain areas. I think if you saw just this past homestand, they had that one inning there of just like one great defensive play after another. I think he has improved at third base. I think his swing decisions and his offensive approach has improved as well. But at a certain point, a front office, a coaching staff needs to see results. And that just hasn't been there right now. And it stands out even more because the Cubs have so many other weak spots in their lineup that you can't really hide him, in the bottom third of your lineup and let him figure it out. Like, they need him to be just a middle of the order slugger, and it hasn't quite gotten there yet. I mean, you're looking at a slightly below average major league hitter in terms of OPS plus. Certainly not the leap the Cubs had hoped for. You're looking at a guy who made his debut in 2022. He's accumulating service time. This is just not a point where you can say like, oh, we're just going to run it back with Christopher and guarantee that he's your third baseman slash DH. And I'm not really as focused on the prospects behind him. Maybe Matt Shaw does come up or whatever, but I think what we were just talking about earlier, the pressure to win in 2025, I'm not sure how you can just like move on from Christopher Morel and then just hand a job to Matt Shaw or some other prospect and hope that he figures it out on the fly. I think you would probably be looking more at, does Alex Bregman want to come and play in Chicago? Or is there some other like short-term fix or a complimentary player to work with Morel? I think if Christopher was having a better year, you'd probably hear his name mentioned more prominently in trade rumors as well. So we'll see what he does the last 2 months of the year. I don't think that leash has run out, but it is just by definition shorter because he's been around for a few years now and has not definitively answered the question of whether or not like he can be a third baseman, where is he going to play? And the Cubs are really sort of stuck with a group of position players otherwise. Aaron Schmitty wonders, and this is a good one as well. Hate to be talking about 2025 in July, but here we are. Do you think Corbin Burnes is a good fit for the 2025 rotation if the Cubs deal Taillon at the deadline? Starting pitching is hardly a hole, but Burnes, Steele, and Shota would be one of the best top three in baseball. Aaron, you're right. It's never a good sign when in the middle of a playoff race, your team or you as a fan is wondering about the upcoming class of free agents. Yes, I think Corbin Burnes would be a good fit for any team that wants to win the World Series. In terms of reality check, I believe he switched to Scott Boras as his representative head of free agency. And if, just being honest, if you looked at the Cubs' history of free agent deals and Scott's history of free agent deals for pitchers, I'm thinking of Garrett Cole as one comp that will probably be top of mind. I don't see the Cubs running out and doing that. However, there's going to be a lot more pressure on them to deliver that kind of star power. And, I would not automatically assume that Taillon will be gone at the deadline, though it is certainly a possibility. I think you're right that starting pitching is not the weakness. I think if you're going to go huge in free agency, you got to get some slug in the middle of that lineup. Like that, to me, someone who can hit 3-run homers, someone who can carry an offense at a time, someone who can help pull an offense out of those slumps so that it only lasts a couple games or a week and not like 2 months. That to me is the number one priority. But I don't think you can look at all the injuries the Cubs have experienced this year and really just the state of pitching health in general across the game and feel like the Cubs are totally set in the rotation. I think adding another starter would certainly make sense. You can't rule that out. And Burnes' relationship with Counsell, as well as his history with the Cubs kind of coming out of the draft, there was a guy that was on their radar. I think all of those things are going to have him on that short list of like kind of dream guys who could really like change the perception of this team. I'm going to group these next prospects related questions together because I thought it was a good way to kind of think about things moving forward. Brad asks, how does the front office view the logjam of outfield prospects? BC Hornets SB wonders, any chance of seeing one of the outfield prospects being called up this season? ONKC ? A reference to Owen Casey. Then Tyler Dershel asks, in order for the prospects to play, they have to get rid of the logjam of offensive players at the major league level. Who would be the most realistic to move off of? Okay, so this idea of a logjam of outfield prospects, or that the Cubs have like way too many great prospects to fit onto one major league field. I'm not buying it. I think that is a mindset that the Cubs have to get out of. We've seen all the injuries that Brendan Davis has experienced, unfortunately, in the early portion of his career. The Cubs, for whatever reason, haven't gotten a good answer, don't really trust or want to see much of Alexander Canario, and that is both while David Ross was running the team and Craig Counsell managing the team. Sure, Kevin Alcantara could be a really nice player. I don't think he is like that close yet, though certainly he has the physical abilities to make up some of those development gaps. And, really one of the things that Jed Hoyer stressed this week during his media session was like, there is no scenario that they're considering in which they would just like let a whole bunch of these kids play. Like they wouldn't call it a rebuild, 3 years ago. They're not going to call it a rebuild in year 5 of Jed Hoyer's contract. So that is one reason why I'm curious about this trade deadline of, are they going to move some of this minor league inventory? Are they in a position to do a deal that helps them for 2025 and maybe even helps this year. I mean, those deals are really hard to pull off, and this front office doesn't have a long track record of doing that. They've been pretty clearly defined buyers or sellers. August and September, I do think there will be more of a shift towards player development, though. Perhaps that does mean Owen Casey. I think it's a red flag, though, that how quickly Craig Counsell had dismissed the idea of, that next hitter up from Iowa. I think there are real questions about the development tracks of some of these players, not Casey in particular, but just the enormous gap between AAA and the majors has become very, very apparent, and the Cubs don't have a lot of spots, as Tyler mentioned, to just give players 500 bats. Now, that is sort of happening with Pete Crow Armstrong, and I do think defensively he brings so much impact that the Cubs can, at a premium position, that the Cubs can live with some of that. But yeah, like Tyler said, their Cubs have very quickly, or all of a sudden seemingly, become stuck, and that's something that they have to deal with at this deadline, as well as next offseason. Sean Healy asks, was the Craig Counsell hiring a rushed decision? Sean, that is a very interesting idea. I would say that Jed Hoyer's style is very deliberate. I'm not sure if he ever makes rushed decisions or decisions out of emotions. You have to remember just how long the Cubs had watched Counsell coach up the Brewers and how frustrated Jed and Theo were watching the Brewers come back and catch the Cubs in 2018. And the year before, they really pushed the defending World Series champs, into a place where they did sort of like jump out and rush into a Jose Quintana trade just to try and energize their team and fend off a really tough Milwaukee group as well. And so you're going back to the end of last season. And I think this is where, when a team doesn't make the playoffs, some unpredictability can creep in. And so Hoyer had all of October to think about this. The Brewers were bounced out of the playoffs very quickly by the Arizona Diamondbacks. And really, as Hoyer was kind of stewing over what he thought should have been a playoff trip, he's seeing the Counsell situation unfold in Milwaukee. And so I think Counsell's track record is so long that I wouldn't call it a rushed decision. And I think Hoyer's nature is such that I wouldn't call it a rushed decision. But yeah, it hasn't worked out the way they thought yet. Doesn't mean it won't be a great hire in the long run. But certainly it has created a perception that leads into a final question here that really jumped out at me as something that I've been thinking about on my own, something I've been talking about with other reporters, and it's from Hoops. It says, Counsell is a steady presence. So are the guys in the clubhouse. No grit, no sandpaper. The Cubs seem to have responded to Justin Steele showing some fire, but have now lost it again. Does this team need some sandpaper in the everyday lineup if Counsell can't/won't provide it? This is kind of an unanswerable thing, and it is something that the Cubs will no doubt be asking themselves in the audit of this season, like the mix of personalities. And I think you're right, Hoops, that this group of players is very professional, diligent, hardworking, and I think Counsell is right to stress how long the season is and to be yourself, and that you can't manufacture a lot of this stuff. At the same time, it's hard to look at this group and how things have unfolded and think yeah, they got it right, that this is a great kind of chemistry, the intangibles, whatever it is, the stuff that you can't measure. However, after covering the end of the Joe Madden era, I am very, very hesitant to point at things like grit and emotional temperament when it's clear that the Cubs have so many obvious talent deficiencies like up and down their roster. Like if you have the catching setup is not good enough. Third base has been a question mark for a long time. Pete Crow Armstrong's defense, elite in center field. His offense, nowhere close to that level yet. You have guys with long track records who have long-term contracts who have clearly underperformed. If Cody Bellinger hits a couple more home runs, if Dansby Swanson gets just a little bit closer to what has been his career norm, are we talking about this? Or are we kind of lauding them for their kind of quiet determination and their stick-to-itiveness? I don't know, but by playing down to this level, it has certainly opened up a whole new line of questioning that is, quite frankly, not comfortable for anyone involved in the Cubs organization. So thank you, everyone, for your questions. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our Foul Territory crew behind the scenes who just hustle and work around the clock, and they will continue to do so around the trade deadline. Our buddy Sahaj Sharma, my co-host and colleague at The Athletic, will be back from vacation here very soon. We'll be coming at you with another episode, and we'll be responding to everything that happens around the trade deadline. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye.